Hello and welcome to Prairie Podcast. This is your host, Morgan Rottery. Today we will be discussing the effects of small mammals in prairie habitats. Here to discuss this riveting topic is Dr. Vole, a mammologist at a research institute in Missouri. Hello, Dr. Vole here. Hi there. So, Dr. Vole, what type of research do you do? At the moment, I'm studying some small mammal communities and prairie habitats throughout Missouri. That's interesting. What aspects of the community are you looking at? Well, first I should explain what the habitat is like. Prairies in Missouri and throughout North America have been greatly reduced due to agriculture and some other effects caused by humans. This has led to a very fragmented landscape of habitat. Fragmentation is usually a negative thing for organisms living in the environment. So, I'm looking at community composition based on the size and shape of the habitat patch, which is a small subset of the habitat. I'm also looking at the quality of the habitat and the level of disturbance within the patch. So how do you think those factors will affect the mammals living in prairies you're studying? Typically, as patch size increases, species occupancy also increases. In other words, there will be more species if the patch is bigger than if the patch is smaller. If the habitat is high quality, there's likely to be more species, though species from low-quality habitats might just be using these high-quality patches for resources. The level of disturbance can also change what species are using the habitat. Some species really like disturbance and kind of patchy, fragmented edges, while others are very sensitive to it. So, let's talk about what animals we're looking at here. So the species we most often see in prairies in Missouri are from the order Rodentia. These are small mammals that have two long incisors that are mostly used for gnawing. This is in part what's made them so successful globally. Okay, so all I heard was rodent and immediately thought of mice and rats, right? So mice and rats are in the order Rodentia, but there are some other super cool mammals in the order. My favorites and the coolest are jerboas, who have some of the largest ears relative to their size of any other animal. They're also very cute, and I would highly recommend looking up a picture. I also like porcupines, capybaras, which are the largest rodents, and these are a little less cute, but a very cool rodent, the naked mole rat. Wow, I had no idea porcupines were rodents. Also, back to the beginning, why prairies? Prairies are a dangerously dwindling habitat, especially here in the Midwest. They've been largely converted to agricultural areas, and then we really need prairies here because the rich plant and animal communities need monitoring and managing in order to preserve some of the species I mentioned above. Oh wow, that's unfortunate. Sounds like these guys need all the help they can get. Are there lots of mammals in this order? Oh man, there are so many. Rodentia is actually the most diverse order of mammals, and it contains the most species and individuals of any other mammalian order. We have 7 families from Rodentia in Missouri, but species in this order occur in all corners of the world, from lemmings in Siberia to jerboas in the Sahara Desert. Wow, these guys really know how to get around. What species do you most commonly see in Missouri? In our research areas, some of the most common would be the western harvest mouse, the fulvous harvest mouse, the deer mouse, the white-footed mouse, and in woodsy areas, the hispid cotton rat. Hispid cotton rats are pretty large and they can be pretty feisty. And then, of course, there's one of my favorites, the prairie vole. Wow, seems like a lot of mice. How can you tell the difference between species? Telling the difference between species must be done very, very carefully. In some species, the differences are very minute. Some are also indistinguishable in the field, and genetic data must be analyzed for 100% species identification. Okay, that makes sense. Before today, I thought every rodent looked like a mouse, so I can see where the confusion comes from. What's your favorite species to find in Missouri? My favorite species would have to be the prairie vole. Why is that? Well, prairie voles have a very unique love life compared to other rodents. They actually mate for life. Both male and female help in raising the offspring. Unfortunately, they're not very long-lived, so the relationships don't often last very long. However, prairie voles raised in a lab setting can live up to 3 years and have been observed keeping this bond until death. Even in the wild, when a mate is killed, up to 80% of voles never select another mate. What makes this mating system so unique? Well, it turns out most animals are not so picky when it comes to mates and will pretty much select a new mate every time they breed based on who is available. I will mention, though, that not all prairie vole relationships are completely monogamous. Oh, how so? If a male vole happens upon a female who's ready to mate, he's likely to be unfaithful to his own mate. But sometime after, he'll return to his original partner, for better or for worse. That's very interesting. Why are voles so extensively studied? The lifestyle of voles have been studied in depth in an attempt to understand the human brain. Sounds weird, I know. Researchers have been using the mating systems of prairie voles to try to gain more understanding about neurochemical connections in the brain that could help understand the human brain. The research I have mentioned has mostly been collected by Larry Young, who's a primate researcher at Emory University. Wow, what interesting work. Let's backtrack a bit. How do you actually come into contact with these mammals? Aren't they scared of humans? Yes, very much so. They're not always easily observed in a field setting. The best way to closely observe and monitor these small mammal populations is through trapping. Okay, so is that just like how you trap mice in your kitchen? Not exactly. We use a live trap called a Sherman trap. This allows us to capture the animal and release it unharmed, so we are not influencing anything about the population. So how does the trap work? The Sherman trap is basically a small metal box. It has a trap door that closes behind it when the animal steps on a platform that triggers the door to close. How do you get animals to go in? Lots and lots of peanut butter. That would probably get me too, to be honest. So how does one go about setting up these traps? There are lots of different trapping methods out there. For most of my studies, I use a point transect method. This method involves setting traps at certain points along a line drawn through your research site. The points can be chosen systematically or randomly. Think of the point transect method like lines on a football field. You would follow the line and then choose points on that line to set traps. What other aspects of the habitat do you look at? Plant species are very important to animal populations also. Taking inventory of plant species richness, the actual number of species abundance, the number of individuals of a certain species, and the amount of cover each species provides are very important factors when you are looking at any habitat. So once the data is collected, what happens next? Well, this is where it gets less fun, for some folks anyway. For my data, I mostly use occupancy models to show what is going on with species at my study sites. Occupancy analysis is basically evaluating whether a species is present or absent in a certain area. That doesn't sound so bad. No, it isn't. It can actually be very interesting and is used in many areas of wildlife research. I didn't know we even had prairie in Missouri. Is this a common habitat? Well, prairie is often overlooked because it's not exactly what you would call a vacation spot. But as I mentioned earlier, prairie habitat is sadly being degraded throughout much of the country. That's too bad. What's causing the degradation? There are lots of factors that contribute to this problem. A growing human population means more space for development and loss of many large undisturbed spaces. Prairies have been hit particularly hard by agriculture, since these habitats are typically ideal for crop growing and as grazing areas for livestock. The rich soils of these prairie communities allow for very diverse plant communities, which makes them valuable to the agricultural industry. Wow, that's pretty sad. How can the average Joe help out? Listen to your local researchers and donate to your local Prairie Foundation. You can donate money or you can volunteer your time helping to plant new prairie species. Do we have any foundations in our area that folks could get into? The Missouri Prairie Foundation is a great organization that works all throughout Missouri to educate the public about our precious prairie areas. What sort of things does the Missouri Prairie Foundation do? They have many events such as native plant sales, species identification walks, and many opportunities for the public to learn about prairies, all for free. They even have another initiative called Grow Native that promotes the planting of native plants for decoration in urban areas. That sounds cool. How does planting natives in our yard help prairies? Planting natives ensures that we won't have as many invasive plants intruding on prairies from landscaped yards and houses. Planting natives also provides a great food source for many native pollinators like hummingbirds or butterflies. Whether you have a flower box in the balcony of your apartment, which I've had, or acres of land planted in Missouri natives, everyone can do their part to help continue the legacy of prairies. Very inspiring. Makes me want to go out and buy a bunch of plant pots for my porch, which I definitely need. Dr. Vole, I appreciate your time and thank you for enlightening the audience about your research topics. Thank you for having me. Always a treat to talk about mammals. Well, folks, that wraps up our Prairie podcast. Join us next week for a new topic, and as always, thanks for listening.